We really want technologies that can be maintained and operated locally. So you often see that people become completely dependent on foreign experts. And that means that once the project is over and something goes wrong, it ends. At TAHMO, we are quite a success, I would say. And I think the main factor of success was that we have local, motivated engineers. And as TAHMO, we invest also in the people working in the field. So it's not just, we work very closely with universities. Myself, I'm at a university. I call it laboratory, academy, and incubator. So you need these three.
Hey everyone, welcome to the new episode of What Are We Talking About? Today we are thrilled to have a truly special guest, Professor Nick van de Giesen from TU Delft, Netherlands, where he holds the chair of Water Resources Engineering. He serves as chairman for the Delft Global Initiative and is an advisor for Smartphones for Water. Nick has been deeply involved in innovative initiatives like TAHMO and TEMBO, which are transforming environmental monitoring in Africa. In this episode, we'll dive into the current state of environmental monitoring in Africa, the challenges of sustaining observation networks, and the innovative approaches driving progress in environmental sensing. We'll hear Nick's inspiring vision for the future of environmental monitoring and the exciting breakthroughs he hopes to see in the coming years. Stick around for this insightful conversation with Professor Nick. We had the pleasure of discussing this with him at the ASU Fall Meeting 2024 in Washington, D.C.
Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I just want to start with a very simple question. How is your ASU going so far?
It's fine, yeah. So for me, it's always the end of the year, and I come here both to look for new things and also to look forward a bit, but also look back at the old year, things that went well, things that did not go well, and what we have to do about it. So far, it's been quite inspiring. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So do you find anything special or different this year compared to your previous ASUs?
No, it's a bit busier for me. Usually there are not that many activities, but this year there's quite some things going on. So we just have the first session of the citizen science meeting, which was very interesting. A lot of exciting projects were presented there. And yeah, Washington DC is also interesting because of it's an interesting setting. So it's always interesting to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Today we want to focus our talk more on like environmental monitoring or sensing, particularly based in Africa continent. Yep. So what got you interested in environmental sensing in the first place, and especially in that part, like the African region?
Yeah. So more or less by accident, I did research. I started doing research in Africa. I started my MSc fieldwork in Guinea-Bissau and then my PhD fieldwork in Rwanda. And then I did a postdoc in Ivory Coast. And every time you sort of run into this problem that there's not enough data. There's it's difficult to get data. You don't know the quality of the data. Even simple things like rainfall, which for a hydrologist is sort of like a starting point, were difficult to get. Sometimes people are protective about them. Sometimes the quality is not good. For all kinds of reasons, just very difficult to get these data. So we just decided, okay, if we want to have some impact, what can we do? And then we said, well, let's start at a basis. Let's start collecting and distributing data on weather and water in Africa.
Yeah. So can you take us back to the first time that you visited Africa, and what was that for? What was your impression?
Oh, that's a very long time ago. And it was in Guinea-Bissau, which is a bit of a special country in the sense that it's extremely poor. Yeah, it was just decolonized or not so long ago. It was a beautiful country, and people were very interesting there in the sense that it was really very authentic in the sense that what you would expect when you talk about Africa. They had not. When you go to Africa now, you go to a city like Nairobi or something like that. It's just like any city in the world, and it's like you hardly notice any difference anymore between the cities. But these rural people, they were very much still doing exactly the same things that they've done for centuries. And that was very interesting, very exciting. Yeah.
Before you start any big projects like TAHMO or TEMBO there, so how was the state of environmental or hydrometeorological monitoring in Africa, and where did you see the gaps or opportunities there?
Yeah, so Africa is huge, and there's a lot of differences between countries. But in general, it's underserved by environmental sensing. Um, Weather is okayish when it comes to airports, but as soon as it's about other things, so if you want to serve other communities, then airports and airlines, it becomes a little bit difficult. Now, some places it's better than others. A country like Kenya, for example, the Kenya Met Department is relatively well resourced, but if you go to a place like Madagascar, I think it's the fourth largest island in the world, their meteorological service is, they hardly get any money from the government to serve this huge island, and then so it's very difficult there to have this information base to work with. If you want to develop your natural resources, if you want to adapt to climate change, if you have to have these baselines that are just often not there. So you have to do, you have to start being smart about these things. That's
So for most of the countries down there, is it unaffordable for the government for these kinds of monitoring investment?
So cost is part of the problem, but it's also they tend to be quite invisible. So where I come from the Netherlands, the National Met Service, they provide information which is reliable, and people plan their days around the information that is provided. Also, warning systems, etc., etc. They're very well developed.
Yeah.
So nobody would think about not funding them because they have a clear social and economic function in society. They're much less visible in most tropical countries, especially in Africa. The forecasts they produce are often not very reliable for several reasons. One reason is just that the observations are not there. So if you don't know what the status is of the atmosphere today, and now we're going to predict how it is tomorrow, how are you going to do that if you don't even know what it is now? It's like, where is it moving? So the quality of the forecast is usually not very high, and that means that they don't have an important role to play. They don't have the visibility, and that does not help when they start distributing very scarce government resources. Again, a place like Kenya, it's a little bit better because with the recent floods, the Kenya Met Department really took a role, started warning citizens, setting up early warning systems, being successful in that. And then, if the government see the value of this, I think they will also be more willing to pay. It's not a lot of money we're talking about anyway. So, it's like some Met services, they get $50,000 per year, which is not a lot of money.
Yeah.
So how can you really build something on that? It's very difficult. But I'm convinced that once that the services are there, the visibility is there, the money will follow. Yeah.
So you have been working on quite a different project, I think for quite a long time now in that particular region. So can you share some experience? What kind of project are you working there for?
Yeah, so we started, I think my first very serious project was what we called the Global Volta project that started around 2000. It was mainly West Africa, Ghana, Burkina Faso. And we really looked at the impact of climate and climate change, land use change as well, on the water resources of this river basin. And it was really a scientific project. So we did a lot of measurements there. Unique data sets were produced, but it was really science-based and science-oriented. Of course, with a lot of local partners. It's not like we went there and did it was based in Germany at the time. But there's a lot of local partners, and that was very interesting, and we learned an awful lot. And from that grew other projects, like we had EU projects. We have the big TAHMO project or organization, I would say. And yeah, it's all about monitoring weather and building services on top of the data that we gather, create value socioeconomically. And that's what we've been doing for a long time now.
Yeah.
It's,
So on a regional scale, like the large projects like TAHMO, what kind of difference is it making on the field, like on the regional scale in Africa?
Yeah, that's a long-term process. So also when you do measure weather, let's say, it's to create value with that. It's a long and difficult, not difficult. It's a long process.
Yeah.
And it's really about producing better forecasts, for example. That means these data have to feed into forecast systems. Those forecasts have to be distributed. It has to be translated into information that people can use. For example, in Ghana now we're working on having better weather forecasts for horticulture. So farmers know when to sow, when to spray, when to harvest, and things like that. And it is making an impact on the ground, but it's a very long process. It's not like, you put the. Sometimes people think, once you measure you have a weather station somewhere, everything is fine. It's like, no. It's the beginning of a long chain of a long information chain that has to involves a lot of people and a lot of kinds of expertise. So it's not, So you really have to show some persistence in that. You have to be there. It's not like you do something and then you run away. It's going to work. It's like you have to be there, stay there, talk to people, understand their needs. What can you do? What can you not do? So if you talk to farmers, they would love to know what is going to be the rainfall in the next 2 months.
Yeah.
Well, nobody knows. We cannot. Sometimes some places you can say, well, there'll probably be a very wet season because of El Nino or La Nina, but many places you cannot even say that. So you also have to be a little bit realistic on what can be done. And then, keep talking, keep improving, keep working.
So we know that monitoring, and while talking about environment or weather monitoring, as you mentioned, it's a very long process. So is that the reason that the government, they don't see an immediate return of some kind of investment, that they don't want to invest in mostly the monitoring part? Do you think that's one of the reasons?
It's part of it. Yes, it's also politically not very sexy. So it's if you're a government, you have very limited resources. You can build a school, or you can build a weather station. The school is much more visible, right? And it's tangible, and the people in the village will know, there's a school now. If there's a weather station, it's quite removed from the daily experiences of people. And again, like we said before, it's like it takes, in order for those stations to produce real value, there's a lot that has to happen still. And even then, people don't often realize it starts somewhere with the station. I think that's an important part, and that's why for weather services in Africa, they have to become a little bit more, in a way, assertive, but also a little bit more, they have to start marketing themselves a little bit better and having products that are visible and things like that are directly useful for people. And that's not so easy, because,
So the traditional way of weather or environmental monitoring that the government is doing, or the governments were doing, and the introduction of projects, a kind of regional projects like TAHMO. So what are the differences in approaches for the monitoring? Like, are you taking are you using a different kind of sensor? Are you using citizens? Are you using remote sensing? What is the difference between these two approaches?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a spectrum there. So you cannot say this is one side and is the other. But the TAHMO approach, the TAHMO is not a project. It's a long-term thing. Yeah, we celebrated our 10th anniversary earlier this year. We will definitely exist for another 10 years. And so it's a long-term program. It's not a project. Projects are actually not very good for things. I will come back to that a little bit later, maybe. But what we have done is we started out from the technology, which is not necessarily a good starting point, but okay, that's where we started from. We thought, like, okay, it should be possible to have more affordable, more robust weather stations. And that's how we started. And then we quickly figured out, like, okay, it's not just the technology, it's especially the people in the field. So we have to have local engineers who are motivated to take care of things, get things in the field. We also early on decided to put most of the stations at schools, high schools. So that's how we involve citizens. So that's what the citizen science part of this program is. And we developed a bit of curriculum for the schools. Some schools are very sensitive to that, other ones are not so interested. So it's also a very mixed reaction you get there, but it's definitely very important. And that's how we do things. Whereas a government agency, they always want the most expensive station. Yeah, for all kinds of reasons. Maybe it's a little bit better, but maybe for other reasons as well. And then it's not necessarily easy to maintain that locally, and that's a very important thing. So we also in the newer projects we have now, like TEMBO, and that's not just about weather, it's also about river discharge and about lakes and things like that. We really want technologies that can be maintained and operated locally. So you often see that people become completely dependent on foreign experts. And that means that once the project is over and something goes wrong, it ends. Just maybe one example, I won't mention the country, but it was a small country in West Africa, where the World Bank had funded a hydrological observation network with telemetry for early warning systems, for floods and things like that. Must have been an expensive project. My guess is somewhere between 50 and 100 million or something like that. The telemetry stopped about a month after the project had ended.
That's
because
crazy.
the SIM cards that are in these things, they need topping up. Maybe $1 a month. And it's, there was just no mechanism within the hydrological services department to do that.
Yeah.
And maybe they had the money even, but it was difficult to organize that. And I think in many places, that's just not in Africa. Those kind of simple things can be killers for, you make a huge investment, and then these simple things happen. It can be a power thing. The battery is not working anymore. The solar panel being stolen. Small things that are that kill projects. So that's why I'm not a big fan of projects. Because these projects, they have an end. I mean, we need them because that's how we grow and that's why we do our research, etc. But you would like to move to a model where you have more long-term funding. Or more long-term income, and that's not an easy thing because nobody does it yet. So but I think it's necessary. Yeah.
So it seems that obviously there are several challenges setting up or maintaining these observation networks. So what do you think, the major challenges you have faced while working?
Yeah, let me say that so as TAHMO we are quite a success, I would say, and I think the main factor of success was that we have local, motivated engineers, and as TAHMO we invest also in the people working in the field. So it's not just like, you have to do this, and then in the end of the month you get some money. It's also we engage people, we organize training, where people travel relatively. People get to travel to places where otherwise they would not travel. So we really try to expose people to exciting opportunities and things like that. And I think that's being appreciated, and that motivates people to keep going. So we have people who were there more than 10 years ago when we just started. Like people in Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, they are still there. And they're still enthusiastic about the whole project. So I think that's a key to success. So it's always. So we talked about money. You need some money, but it's especially people, skilled people, and engaging them and keeping them engaged and keeping them interested and keeping them motivated. I think that's the main key to success. And that's why it's difficult for government agencies also. Because typically, a government agency, well, they by definition, they're a little bit hierarchical. That means the older people, they go, they get to travel, right?
Yeah.
And the younger people, they have to do all the work. Whereas in this day and age, the technology, like especially computer-based technology, the whole IT structure and stuff like that, you need young people.
Yeah.
And why would they go work there when they're very low in the hierarchy? They don't get any serious responsibility. Whereas the private sector, banks or insurance companies, they pay way more. They challenge you. They have equipment to work with and stuff like that. So I think that's a very important part of why it's difficult for a government agency to be very, very good. So one thing we're looking at is sort of like public-private partnerships, where we have small local companies where you can engage these younger people that are technologically way more advanced than the traditional older bureaucrats sitting there somewhere. I don't nothing wrong with that, but you understand what I mean. It's it's like when you look at the big companies here in the United States, they're continuously looking for young people who are smart and talented, and they try to engage them. And that's very difficult for a local government to do that. But for a small company, you can. So I always call it, we work very closely with universities. Myself, I'm at a university. I call it laboratory, academy, and incubator. So you need these three. So we work with the university to figure out new technologies. We test them. That's sort of the laboratory. Then you have to teach people. You have to, but whether they are professionals or new students, that's where the academy part comes in. You have courses and you teach them about these new technology. And you have an incubator in the sense that you also need a bit of entrepreneurship and bringing these things to market and making sure that it all starts paying for itself. And I think it's a very exciting thing to do. And it's also we see some small signs of success now, so I'm very excited about this one.
So do you see this model being like a successful or sustainable model, like in terms of finance and operational viability?
I see two pathways for this. One is this one that we just described, sort of like create value and that people are willing to pay for one way or the other. That's one pathway. It's a difficult pathway, I can assure you. We've been trying and we see some very small success. So that's one path. The other one is that we are in an arena where donor money will always be a major part of the whole thing. And donors, it's like an organization like TAHMO, we now have 600 weather stations in 20 different countries. We have a total budget of maybe less than $500,000 a year. Donors easily come in and they give 100 million. So we could run TAHMO for 2 centuries for that. It's like, so these are different numbers. And if we can, but these are important numbers. So if we can convince donors that yes, the TAHMO model where we have this it is kind of a public-private partnership, but instead of just throwing money into this big bucket and you never know what's coming out, to take a little bit of this and use that to fund these kind of activities, that's sort of like the second pathway. So we're exploring both, and we see progress along both pathways. So, and in the end, I think it may have to be a mixture of these things. If you have a paying customer, you have proof that you are really producing value. Is it all about the money? No, it's not all about the money. But if someone pays, it means that, yes, you're producing something that someone values. I'm not saying that it works the other way around, that nobody's willing to pay that you don't produce anything. But if someone pays, you produce something valuable. So I think you have to do both. So like flood early warning systems, very important part of what we do. It will be very difficult to have someone pay for that on a regular basis. But a donor may endow a system So if they just come in and build it and say, here's the system and you train some people, that's not going to work. But if they endow it for, let's say, 10 years, that might be another pathway of to keep this going.
So how I see this is that maybe there might be a need of huge investment in the beginning while setting up, and there might be another round of investment that is continuously required to operate or sustain those things. So why not take the help from the donors from the first part and try to convince the government, or as you say, on the application side, if someone is willing to pay and continue that model, because there won't be any donor who will be able to provide you support for a long time, right?
Yeah, so that is a model we are exploring as well, especially for flood early warning systems. And what we do, let's say, usually what happens in a project, okay, you go out, okay, we have to protect this city or something. We know there's flooding, we have to protect, okay, what do we have to do? And then you design something and it's like $20 million or maybe 50 or maybe 100, I don't know. And then the donor invests and that's the end of it. We try to, and we call that design for purpose. Yeah, it's fit for purpose. Now, it was a very interesting document actually produced by the World Bank that also talks about the cost of maintaining these systems, also the monitoring system, all this stuff. And they talk about fit for budget. So you have to do both. It has to be fit for purpose, of course, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And it has to be fit for budget. That means you should start out by going to talk to the municipality, let's say how much money can you generate every year to maintain a system like this? And even if it's a very small amount, let's say $5,000 or something, you say, okay, then we're going to design a system that produces, that can be maintained and operated for $5,000 per year. And then you have something. Yeah, it will be much smaller maybe than a $20 or $50 million project. But at least you have something that will be continued to continuously operated. Interestingly, is if you can also mix it a little bit, because maybe when the donor is like a development bank, you could also you have the investment costs or the capital costs, and you have the operational costs, so capex and opex. You can maybe even increase a little bit the capital investment in order to decrease the operational costs. So there's a lot of things you can do there, and I think that it is definitely a worthwhile a method. We are especially targeting in a European project called TEMBO. We're especially targeting smaller cities. Because if you go to a big city like Lagos or Accra or Abidjan or something like that, okay, there will be a lot of money and donors are interested. But these secondary cities, maybe less than 1 million people, nobody's looking at them. They call them secondary cities and stuff like that. But they're the fastest growing urban population, part of the urban population in Africa. About 2/3 of the urban population in Africa lives in such cities.
Wow.
So in order to serve them, you have to have these projects with a much lower, much more modest operational budget. And we really hope that we can start piloting maybe already next year. The World Bank seems to be interested in piloting this, so we really hope that we'll start.
So let us talk about a different aspect here. So when you talk about like the initiative like TAHMO and TEMBO, so I think you also focus on the design or the use of some cost-effective compared to the commercial sensors or equipment. You are using some cost-effective sensors. So do you have like enough investment in producing those designs or sensors, or you just use some of the market available products?
Yeah, we do a little bit both. We think in order so making it more affordable, I think that's an important part of this model. Maybe just the previous topic when we talked about designing something that's fit for budget. If it's all a little bit more cost effective, it's easier to do. So in the TEMBO project, for example, we're looking at cutting costs to 10% of existing solutions. And it's surprising how easy it is to do. And I'm not talking just by buying the stuff, so you buy some cheap stuff or something like that, and you put it out there. No. It has to do everything it has to do, and it also has to be affordable in terms of operational costs. So maintaining the thing. Are there local technicians that can maintain the systems? Because that's often what's wrong with these very expensive things. They cannot be maintained without external inputs and stuff like that. And then of course it will not happen anymore. So we're definitely designing for a lower total cost of ownership to make it easier to fund the whole thing indefinitely. That's an essential. We think it's an essential part of the solution.
Yeah, what I realize, I don't know, this might be my opinion, but what I think is that there has been not sufficient investment or interest made by the big companies who are making these all like commercial sensors to make the sensors affordable so that or make it scalable. So what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, the thing is that the engineering costs a lot. And the market is small. It's interesting, the only way when you go to, you can buy cheap weather stations now. For $100 you can buy a weather station. And when you look at it, the technology of those weather stations has not changed for the past 20 years or so. It's the same weather station. Because they don't, if you would improve it, the engineering behind it would be very costly. And these companies, you call it big companies, but none of them are really, really big. Yeah? So they're not, they're all small to medium-sized companies, really. And they don't have the millions and millions lying around to do the R&D that you would need to build something. So, and I've tried some things myself. It's a slow process, and and if the market is not there, then there's also not much of an incentive to do that. So it's a very difficult chicken and egg kind of thing. I know, for example, if I can give one example, we had a long time ago, maybe 14 years ago, we had the idea to have what we call an acoustic disc drometer. We have a little drum with a piezometer in there, a piezo disc. That's something, if you tap on it, it gives a little signal. Actually, usually it's the other way around. You give it a little signal and it starts to vibrate. So that's why all the alarm systems, or when it says beep in your phone or whatever, that's what it is. And okay, that's interesting. And now, the harder, and we're going to measure rainfall with it. So the bigger the drop, the bigger the signal, should be doable. It took us a long time just to get it technically correct. Now, maybe we also did not invest like millions in it as well, but still, there was quite some investment in there. At least maybe total 500,000 or something like that for a relatively simple instrument. And it only now, so we're talking 14, 15 years later, we see the first commercial applications of that technology. So it is a difficult thing. And if there's, we often talk to these people, and if you have a new idea, it's like, well, there's no market for it. It's why, they can really not afford it. So the market is small. So what we do a lot is piggyback on technologies that are being developed for much bigger markets. One very good example is GPS, or what they call GNSS receivers. Because we're going to want to have the drones, the UAVs, and then the self-driving cars. It used to be that in absolute terms, these things, the consumer ones, would have a 30, 40 meter accuracy. For a self-driving car, that's not good. It cannot be, cannot be all over the place. So now they have these things that are within, half a meter, 10 centimeter accuracy. And if you do it right, if you do it a little bit smart, we can get sub-millimeter accuracy on things like dams and things like that. So we're using GPS for many, many, many different things now. It's very interesting, but it's only possible because there's a mass market for other applications. So those are the things you have to sort of look into. And of course, in general, we have the whole CPU development and things like that, which we make a lot of use of. But there's the market for environmental monitoring is very, very limited,
Yeah.
and all these companies, you see them, they're driven by enthusiasm more than by finance. It's like it's not that there's an awful lot to be made.
Yeah, coming back to the like environmental sensing in Africa. So, what is your vision for the next few decades? What do you plan to do? If you can fast forward like 10 or 20 years, what changes you see there?
Well, if I knew for sure, I would be a very rich man. But it's I do think there will be a continued improvement in monitoring systems. Weather will be first, water will be second, and so I see continuous improvement, but it will have ups and downs. And when you look at, for example, the last COP meeting in Azerbaijan, it was it's all about money and things like that. Some of that money will find its way into these improved observation systems. And it's my conviction that without that, it's become very difficult to adjust to climate, to have smart use of natural resources, to have smart use of human resources. You need to know your environment before you can manage it in a sensible and sustainable manner. So I'm moderately optimistic that will happen. I'm a little bit worried about the pace. The pace may be too slow, but we'll just do what we can, and that's.
We can see some aspect like with the development of like AI tools and all, like particular aspect of the society is in a very fast pace that we cannot imagine where it be
Exactly.
like in the next decade. But I know that some of the technologies for the monitoring that we have been using and the pace of development is
Very
way slower than should have been.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah, so if there will be a technological boom in this, I don't know. It's like we're trying, and you see a few places on the globe where we're really trying. Our ambition is definitely to get Africa there as well, to get them on the map and let people start building their own stuff. But if it will happen, and at what scale and at what pace, I don't know. No.
Yeah. So let's zoom out a bit. I would like to ask a few questions about some broader topics. So, what do you think is the most significant challenge that our generation is facing, like from a perspective of a researcher or scientist?
As a researcher, what worries me a lot is, at least in the West, but maybe also elsewhere, a lack of interest of the general public. It used to be that, when I was young, I remember seeing, what is ranked, what do people want to be? What kind of professions do people admire? And number one was professor. Number two was judge. Number three was engineer. Now, the sort of, they want to be a soccer player or a chef in a restaurant or something. Those are the number one. When you are in the limelight of social media and television and whatnot. So, and in the meantime, you hear things. Yeah, science. Yeah, that's just also an opinion. So people don't really understand that. No. Science is not just an opinion. It's based on millions and millions of facts. Not just an opinion of some scientists. It's like no. It's a carefully built. Organization, construction, way of thinking, and people don't appreciate that. And you see it, this weird stuff. People turning away from things like global warming. No, that's nothing. Whereas it's happening. They're seeing it. We can prove it. Or also in the medical world, people are turning away from medicine and things like that. So that really worries me a lot. and it's such a. I'm still, for me, it doesn't matter anymore. I'll reach my pension, and I had a wonderful life. I've seen the whole world, and it's very exciting, and it's always a lot of fun working with young people and all that. But for the next generation, if there will still be that support for science, I doubt it. That's my main worry, I would say.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestion how we can get through it? Like,
Well, look, I guess you were talking about science communication. I think that's extremely important. We have to keep doing that. Still, it will be, if people don't want to listen, it will be you can shout as loud as you want, but they will just, they just won't listen. So it's not an easy thing. We have to keep educating children, engaging children in science projects and things like that. We have to show the excitement. We have to show the logic behind it. And then maybe, it's also people, or maybe also when they see, it's interesting. Take the COVID epidemic, if you see what science did there, it's amazing. We had, in no time, we had a little test you could get, and it was like, wow. Within a year or two, within a year and a half, we had vaccines. And then what do people say? They forget about, or they don't know, or they don't trust it, or they don't, it's like, I don't know what it is. But it's amazing what happened there.
Yeah.
And you would think, oh, this is a good boost for science, because without science, this whole epidemic would have been so much more disastrous.
Yeah.
But it's not the reaction you hear. It's like, oh, yeah, well, this and that. And so it doesn't mean we should give up. It's the only way forward. But it's so. I would advise two things. One is keep at it, be courageous, and keep going, and at the same time look for ways to have fun doing it, because otherwise, it's very difficult to keep going, right? So. And there's so many fun things to do in science, especially in our science. We get to go outside, you see beautiful thing, you work with people. It's all a very positive thing. So keep at it and look for the fun thing. That's what I would say.
Yeah. So we are at ASU, and there are like thousands of young researchers attending this wonderful conference. So what advice do you want to give to all the young researchers that are now struggling or working hard to get into the science?
Yeah, it's. I think it's a very rewarding. I know it looks a bit like a lottery when you're in graduate schools. Like, okay, how do I, okay, then I get a postdoc. Okay, and then what? And how do you ever get to a tenured position? And it looks like you're going through a funnel. But there's many ways. It doesn't have to be universities. There's government agencies. There's a lot of companies these days that have decent research departments, and in the end, it's when I just look around, you always end up in a fine place. You'll be doing fine. So it's. I know it's easy for me to say, but it's also something that I've been seeing over and over again. You don't know where and how, but. The chances that you will not find a satisfying, intellectually challenging life, no, you'll be fine with that. So, and there are many pathways. Be open to all these pathways, I would say.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So before we sign off, you just mentioned we should have fun. So I have a short rapid fire round for you. So
okay.
Share anything, whatever comes in your mind first.
Okay.
So let's start.
Okay.
So if you could teleport to any river in the world right now, so which one would it be and why?
The Congo, I think, because I want to be there, I want to see it, and I've never been, and it's very difficult to get to.
Okay, smart. If rivers could talk, what do you think they would say about us?
They would not have too many kind words, I think. We've been messing with them for a long time, yeah.
So what is the one piece of data you wish we had for like all the rivers in the world now?
Yeah, just the water balance. How much rainfall is there? How much runoff is there?
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
So, what's the most exciting innovation in water, or let's say environmental monitoring, you have encountered recently?
I think telemetry, actually, the fact that the cell phone tower that you can now communicate data easily. I think that's the big thing.
Yeah, I think that's pretty important too. Yeah, I know you have been working in several projects. So, is there a dream project or idea you always wanted to pursue but haven't got the chance yet?
Yeah, there's so many ideas still on the shelf that I would just love to have. I would love to have. Maybe I did it the wrong way around. Maybe you should first try to become very rich and then do this. I've seen, maybe that's a smarter way of doing things. I would love to have a small team of very dedicated engineers bringing these speeding up the development of all these ideas. That would be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if you had one superpower to design a water monitoring gadget, so what would it be? So, if you have the superpower, you can do anything.
Oh my goodness. A superpower. I guess flying would be very convenient. If I could just fly, that would be much easier than sitting in cars on bad roads and things like that. So maybe like Superman, just fly around, lift stuff. Yeah, I think Superman comes pretty close. He can do a lot of useful stuff for us. But I'm not sure if that's.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm not gonna wait until I get superpower. Yeah.
So if you weren't like a scientist or professor, what other career option you would have explored?
I don't know. I come from a family of bakers, so I guess I may have been a baker. I can assure you, when I grew up, being a baker was not a good thing. Nowadays, it's a much easier job, and also a much more respected job than it used to be. So maybe I'd be a baker. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's one book or movie you think everyone should experience, like in their lifetime?
If you read one book, I would say Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. It's a very interesting book because we all tend to think from our underbelly, and they show like that. You're mainly wrong, and you should take the time to think. And it's an excellent book on that you really understand why other people say stupid things, why you say stupid things, and how you can get over that. If there's one book you read, that's the book. Movies are more for fun, I think. My favorite movie is Chinatown. It's about water, also. Water, power, corruption, and how they all come together. So watch that movie out.
Yeah, last but not the least, what is the best piece of advice you have ever received and maybe implemented?
Be yourself, be modest. My mother would, as soon as you would be a little bit cocky or so, my mother would say, remember where you come from. So I think that's a very useful piece of advice. I'm not saying that I always adhere to it, but anytime I get time to think, it's like, no, okay, it's good.
Yeah, awesome. That wraps up our rapid fire round. So thanks for playing along. It was really fun hearing your quick thoughts and perspective on these questions. So well, Nick, I truly appreciate for your time joining the conversation. I think we discussed so many things, and thanks for joining. So any final thoughts you have before we sign off?
I suggest you cut out a lot because otherwise people get bored.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Okay.